We begin today the Gemara on Daf Yud Aleph, Amud Beis, the last two lines in the bottom of the Amud. V'Rabbanan the Pliga led Rab Shimon. We're in the middle of a sugya here, and the Gemara is discussing a concept called Lev Bezdin Masna Aleim. And it's used in different cases. Here the Gemara applies this regarding the Karbanis Tmidim that were used from the Machzas HaShekel of the year, and there were 4 leftover animals that were not going to be used, or similar regarding Ketairas, the leftovers from the Ketairas of that year. So the Gemara said that there's a machlokes about this. According to Rab Shimon, he says there's no concept of Lev Bezdin Masna Aleim. But Rabbanan say there's a concept called Lev Bezdin Masna Aleim, which means that there's a stipulation, there's a condition from the Bezdin, and this is an automatic condition, that whatever is not going to be used could be redeemed and then be used for the next year. Even though, usually in order to redeem something which is not going to be used as a carbon, you have to wait until it gets a mom, and only then could it be redeemed. But here there's a condition of the Bezdin that if it's not going to be used as a carbon, it won't have the full Kedushas HaGuf. It'll only have Kedushas Damim, a Kedusha of its value, of its money, and then you can redeem it right away and then use it for the next year. That's the Rabbanan's opinion about this. So the Gemara here will bring the source of where we see that the Rabbanan say this, and this is based on what we learned on Daf Yud Aleph, various different cases where this is discussed, and the Gemara will go through it to see where is the source of what the Rabbanan said. So the Gemara, Rabbanan, the Pligi, Alei, the Rab Shimon. The Rabbanan that argue in Rab Shimon and say that there's this concept of Lev, Bezdin, Masna Alein. Maninu, where do we find that Chachamim say this? Okay, so here the Gemara will go through what was brought in Daf Yud Aleph. Rabbanan the Ketairas. If you'll say it's what we see that the Rabbanan say regarding Ketairas, this is the Mishnah that it said regarding Ketairas, that the leftover Ketairas of the year, what's done with it? It's redeemed, and then it's used for the next year. Even though there's no blemish in it, but it could be redeemed. So seemingly, the only reason it could be redeemed, even though usually the rule is you can't redeem something which has Kedushas HaGuf, is because there's a Tanai of the Bezdin that if it's not being used for that year, it'll only have Kedushas Damim, and therefore it can be redeemed. Says the Gemara, you can't prove from that Mishnah of Ketairas. Why not? Shani Ketairas. By Ketairas, it's different. The Lav Ra'ayahu. By Ketairas, you can't say that, you know what, let's leave the animal to graze and to get a mum, and then we'll redeem it. It's not an option by Ketairas. So therefore, over here, it's necessary for Chachamim to make this condition that if it won't be used, you could redeem it. But who says that Rabbanan would say that this applies by any animal or by the animals of the carbon tamid that are not being used? Maybe there, it's not necessary to make this Tanai, you just let the animal graze and get a mum, and only then do you redeem it. Says the Gemara, Elo Rabbanan the Para. Maybe it's the Rabbanan of the Braisa that was brought on Daf Yud Aleph about the Para Aduma. What did it say there by the Para Aduma? That even after they dedicated and they were designated one Para Aduma, you're able to redeem it without a mum. And that's even in a case where they just found a nicer, a better quality of Para Aduma. They can exchange it for another one. So you see that the Rabbanan say even without a mum, you're able to redeem it. So that's because of Lev Bezdin Masna. There's a condition that if this is not going to be used, you'll take another one. Says the Gemara regarding this as well, this could be an exception. Shani Para, perhaps the Para Duma is different. The Svara, the Gemara already said before, the Dameha Yikarim, because Para Duma is something which is extremely expensive. And here the Chachamim said, you're buying it and you're paying so much money. If it's going to be used, so then it'll be designated for this. But if you're not going to end up needing it, so then you should be able to redeem it and replace it. Only regarding Para Duma, Alav Dafke applies to just the animals that are left over from the regular carbon tamid. So that therefore the Gemara says, Ve'ela, maybe, where's the source of this Rabbanan? Rabbanan the Amru Loi. It's the Rabbanan of the Amru Loi in the Mishnah. The Mishnah in the beginning of the Perek here, the Chachamim that are saying to Rab Shimon. What's the Amru Loi of the Rabbanan to Rab Shimon in the Mishnah? Rab Shimon says in the Mishnah that you have the carbon chatos, the sa'ir of the chatos, on Yom Kippur, on a Yom Tiv, and on a Shchodesh. And according to Rab Shimon, each one of these karbanis is mechaper for something a little different. On a Shchodesh, it's for one kind of tumah. If you ate from a carbon which is tameh, on Yom Tov, it's mechaper if there's no yidi in the beginning and there is a yidi in the end. And on Yom Kippur, it's mechaper for a different case, for a case where there was a yidi in the beginning. Or rather, let me just correct that. On Yom Tov, it's mechaper when there's no yidi at all, and it's Yom Kippur, which is mechaper when there was no yidi in the beginning. So they're not mechaper exactly for the same thing. So what did it say in the Mishnah? Amru Loi, that the Chachamim said to Rab Shimon, if you had the carbon of Yom Kippur, that for whatever reason was not used for Yom Kippur, it got lost, and now they found it, could you then use it for Yom Tov, for Rosh Chodesh? That was the question that the Rabbanan asked Rab Shimon about this. Okay, so now the Gemara is saying, what are the Rabbanan saying? What the Rabbanan are saying is that we, in our opinion, you could use from the side of Yom Kippur for Yom Tov or for Rosh Chodesh. Why? Because Lev Bezdin Masna. There's a stipulation, there's a condition of the Bezdin that if it will not end up being needed for this, it'll be used for the Yom Tov, and if you don't need it for Yom Tov, you'll use it for Rosh Chodesh. Even if it's not exactly the same carbon, it's not the same exact kapara, but it doesn't matter. There's a Tanai of the Bezdin. That's what the Rabbanan's opinion is. And they're asking Rab Shimon, how about you? What's your opinion about this? That's how we understand what the Rabbanan are saying in the Mishnah. But the Gemara says, not necessarily is that what the Rabbanan are saying. How do you know that Rabbi Yehuda, that the Rabbanan that are asking this from Rab Shimon is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda? Now, what's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion? Rabbi Yehuda also agrees to Rab Shimon that the kapara of this carbon for Yom Kippur, Yom Tov, and Rosh Chodesh is not exactly the same. And therefore, this is what they're saying to Rab Shimon, according to me, according to the Rabbanon, that we hold of this concept that there's a condition of the Bezdin, that if it's not needed for one, that you could use it for something else. So therefore, yikrivu. If it wasn't needed for Yom Kippur, you could then use it for Yom Tov, and if not for Yom Tov, you could use it for Rosh Chodesh. But you that say that you can't, there's no concept of Lev Bezdin Masna Lein, as the Gemara brought before, that this was the opinion of Rab Shimon, that there's no condition that you could use it from one for the other, so that Amah Yikrivu. If it's left over from Yom Kippur, how and why should you be able to bring it for a Yom Tov or for Rosh Chodesh? And at that, the Gemara, the Mishnah said that Rab Shimon answered that you could still bring it from one to another, because according to Rab Shimon, as long as it's a similar kapara, even if it's not exactly the same kapara, but it's a similar kapara of tumah by kachim, it could be brought in a Yom Tov. So how do you know this is the pshat in the Mishnah? Dilma, maybe the Rabbanan in the Mishnah that are asking from Rab Shimon, who are they? Dilma Rab Meir. Maybe it's Rab Meir, or they hold like the opinion of Rab Meir. And this is what they're saying to Rab Shimon. What's Rab Meir's opinion? Rab Meir says that kol asi'irim kaparasan shaveh. As we learned before in the Mishnah and in the Gemara, Rab Meir holds the three se'irim that are brought in Yom Kippur, Yom Tov, and Rosh Chodesh, they're all mechapa for the same thing. For all the different kinds of kaparas, for the Tumah and the Mikdash, it's all mechapa the same thing. So because it's the same kapara, so therefore if it's not going to be brought for one, it can be brought for the other because it's the same kapara. But according to you, Rab Shimon, that each is a different kapara, how could you bring from Yom Kippur for Yom Tov? That's the question that they were asking him. So if that's the case, this Rabbanon that was saying this, Rab Shimon, this is not based at all on the concept of Lev Bezdin Masna. You don't need any condition of the Bezdin there. There's no reason for a condition at all. Says the Gemara, you're right. In what it says here in the Mishnah, there's no source for this. Elo Rabbi Yechanan, Gemara Gomirla. The fact that the Gemara says before that Rabbi Yechanan said that Rab Shimon holds to this concept of Lev Bezdin Masna, and Rabbanan hold the concept of Lev Bezdin Masna, and Rab Shimon disagree. He had a tradition of this. There's no proof of this. So again, Rabbi Yechanan, Gemara Gamila, the Divrei Rab Shimon, ein niftin, that according to Rab Shimon, it cannot be redeemed, because there's no inyan of Lev Bezdin Masna, so you cannot redeem an animal that's not used for what it's needed without waiting for it to get a mum. And the Divrei Chachamim niftin, and according to the Chachamim, it could be redeemed even without a mum. So this is a tradition, but we don't have any source of any Mishnah or any Braisa where we see that Chachamim said this. Okay, so now the Gemara goes on and says as follows: Ul Rab Shimon the Leslei Lev Bezdin Masna Leyen. According to Rab Shimon, that does not hold of this condition of the Bezdin. So my Avdullahu, with these leftover karbanis from the year of the carbon tamid. So what is done with it? Okay, so there would be an option actually to just let it get a mum, and after it gets a mum, then you can redeem it, and then you'll use it for what you need to use it for. But the Gemara here is saying that no, there is actually something that could be done. You don't have to necessarily wait for it to get a mum. So Amar Rab Yitzchak, Amar Rab Yechanan, what you do is mekitzin ben esam mizbeach. when the Mizbeach is empty and there are no Karbanis brought, you take these leftover animals from the carbon tamid, which is an oila. That's what the carbon tamid is. And you use it to be brought on the Mizbeach as an adava for a carbon oila as well. That's what you do. You don't have to wait until it gets a mum, you can bring it as an oila. So Rashi here says that this is based on what Rab Shimon says in the Mishnah regarding the soyer of Yom Kippur, that it can be used for Yom Tif or for Rosh Chodesh, even though it's not identical. The kapara is not identical, but it's similar. Because this is a kapara for mikdash, for the tumah in the mikdash, and this is also a kapara for the tumah in the mikdash, even though it's not identical, so therefore it can be used. So here as well, the leftover carbon tamid, the tamid is an oila. So now you can take that oila and use it for a oilas nadava, for kayetz hamizbeach, even though it's not mamish identical, but it's similar. This is an oila and this is an oila. So you don't have to wait until it gets a mum, and you don't need a special condition of the bezdin to be allowed to redeem it without a mum. You can just use it to bring it as a oila, it's nadava, when the mizbeach is empty. Now, regarding this concept that you can use what is left over, what was not used, to bring it as a oilas nadave, but Rab Shimon would agree that b'seirei chatos, that if you have leftovers from a goat from a carbon chatos, she'ein mekitzin begufan, that you cannot then use it, this animal itself, to be brought as a oilas nadave on the mizbeach. So let's say for whatever reason it's left over from a carbon chatos, it got lost and they used something else and now they have it. If it's left over, it cannot be used from a chatos to an oila. Ela b'demeyan. The only thing you can do with it is you have to redeem it, and then the money of it you can use to bring a carbon oila for the kayetz hamizbeach. And the Gemara explains, because hacha hu demei kara oila v'hashta oila. This that we said, according to Rab Shimon, it could be used for the carbon oila for the kayetz hamizbeach. That's because it was originally a oila for the carbon tamid, and now you're using it as an oila, as an adava for the mizbeach. Aval hasam. However, by a so'er that's left over, the meikara chatas. In the beginning, it was a chatas. So even though now it's not a chatas anymore because it's not needed for the chatas. The chatas was brought already. And v'hashta oila. Now you want to go ahead and use it as a carbon oila. Midrabanan, that can't be done. Why not? Even though l'chayda now it's not a chatas anymore, because gzeide la'acha kapara otu lifne kapara. Because if you're going to allow once the kapara of that chatas was done already, so this animal which is left over seemingly should not retain its name of chatas anymore. Now it can be used as a oila. But then if you're going to allow that to be done, acha kapara otu lifne kapara, then even before this chatas was used for what it needs to be used as a chatas, and it's still a chatas, it still has the name chatas in it, you're going to think that you could exchange it and just use it for a noila. And at that point you can't. If what it's needed for was not yet brought as a carbon, another carbon was not brought in its place, and therefore it still is a chatas, you can't use it as a noila. So even after there was another animal that was already brought as a chatas, Chacham is not allowed to take this leftover chatas and use it as a noila. So no one should confuse and make a mistake to say that even before you can use this chatas as a noila.
What do we think of that we have a chatas that we have to bring, and that we're going to bring it for oil? What can be with the chatas we have to bring then?
If
you have two chatas, you're saying?
They'll make a mistake, they'll bring a chatas for an oila. They still have to bring a chatas, correct? But if they're going to see that after it was brought already as a chatas, there was another animal that was brought in as a chatas in its place, that you could exchange it and bring it later on as an oila. So they would think that even before, an animal that was designated for a chatas could be brought in as an oila, and that's not allowed. So therefore, Chachamim said you could never take an animal that was once a chatas and now bring it as an oila. Amar Abaye, so the Gemara now brings a source to this gzeira, to this concept. And here the Gemara is going to bring three different braises where we see this. So the first one is Afanana mitanina. We learned this in a braisa that we had before already. It says Par v'sor shel yom kippurim she'avdu. If you have the par and the soyer that are brought, there's a chatas and Yom Kippur, but they got lost, and they v'hifresh acherim tachteya, and therefore there were other animals that were brought in their place. So now and then they found what was lost. Now it's left over. Or another case, the seirim of avodah zara that's brought as a chatas for a tzibor, and now they found the original carbon, and it's left over. What happens with this? Kulon yamusu divrei Rabbi Yehuda. So since the carbon was already brought for what it was needed, these leftover chatas, even though it's a chatas of a tzibur, Rabbi Yehuda says, just like regarding the chatas of a yochid, there's a halach l'moshe misinai that once it was brought, the kapara was brought, it has to be left to die. There's nothing you can do with it. It's the same with the chatas of a tzibur. Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon Aimrim that no, that halach l'moshe misinai does not apply here. So rather, what you do is yiru, you let it graze, achi yistovu, it gets a mum, and then v'yamachru, it's sold, v'yiplu the mail in adava. The money is then used for an adava to bring another carbon from it for the Beis Hamikdash. She'ein chatos tzibur mesa. The concept of leaving a carbon chatos where the kapara was already done with another animal to die, that doesn't apply by a chatos of a tzibur, only by a yochid. So the Gemara asks, and what Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon say, va'amai, why do you have to wait until it gets a mum and then you can redeem it? Nikrevu inu gefayu oila. If this chatos, what had to be brought as a chatos was already brought with other animals, with another animal, and then now this was found and it's left over, so why can't you just take this animal itself and use it for an oila? The chatas that it was before is not needed anymore, so it doesn't have its name chatas anymore now. Now it should be brought as an oila. Elalav, so the answer is, from here you see, Shma Mina, Gzeira Lacha Kapara, Oto Lifne Kapara. Even after the kapara was already done with another animal, and now you want to use this chatas as an oila, it can't be done, because then you may think that even before, when it's still mamish chatas, that you could use it as an oila. Another ayah, we learned this in a Braisa, or maybe this is a Mishnah actually, it's a Mishnah in Masechta Yuma, where it speaks about the two goats that are brought on Yom Kippur, the Shnei Seirim, where one is La Hashem and one is La Azazel. What happens if one of those died? So they have to be brought together as a pair. So now if one died, you're going to have to bring another two again. So if you're going to bring another two again, you're going to have one that's left over here. So v'hasheni, that second one which is left over, what's done with it? Yireh achi yistav, you have to allow it to get a mum, and then v'yamachav yiplu damel v'nedava. It could be sold, and then the money is used for nedava to bring a carbon in the mizbeach. So again, the question is, v'amai, why do you have to allow it to get a mum and then only use it? The money as a nedava. Yikrav iu gufe ayla. If it's left over, before it was a chatas, but now if it's not needed for the chatas anymore, so it should be used for an ayla. Elalav shma mina. From here we see gzeira achar kapara auto lifne kapara, that this gzeira applies, that even after it's not used as a chatas anymore, you can't bring it itself as an ayla. A third proof the Gemara says Amar Avina afanana mitanina, that we learned in a Braisa where it says Osham shemesu bailov, by a carbon Osham and its owner died, Oish and eskapru bailov, or the owner already brought a different animal as the kapara for their carbon Osham. So what's the halacha with an Osham? So here the question is a Osham similar to a chatas? By a chatas, there's a halacha l'moshe misina that animal has to be left to die. Do we say the same for an Osham? That's the machlokes here. So one opinion is that no, it's actually not the same as the chatas. And here the halacha is yireh achi yistoiv, you let it get a mum, v'yamacher, and then you sell it, v'yiplu dam of nedava, and the money goes for a nedava. And this is the opinion here of the Tanakama, that whenever you say regarding a chatas, it has to be left to die because the owner died or because he already got his kapara, by an Osham, you have to wait until it gets a mum. However, Rabbi Eliezer says no, it is the same as a chatos. Yamus, it's left to die like the chatos. It's part of that halacha l'moshe misinai. Rabbi Yeshua Aimer, or the other gersi here is Rabbi Elazar Aimer, that yavi b'dama of oila, that you bring with its money and oila. Okay, so what Rabbi Yeshua or Rabbi Elazar says seems to be saying similar to what the Tanakama says, that you leave it to get a mum and then you bring with its money and an oilas nedava. Rashi here says that according to the Tanakama, the carbon that's brought later is not a carbon of this yochid. It's a carbon that any of the details of a carbon yochid do not apply. Rabbi Yeshua or Rabbi Elazar is saying yavi b'dam of oila, that he brings with its money oila as a carbon yochid. Okay, but the Gemara asks, v'likrav ha gufe or ho gufei oila. Why wouldn't we just say that if it's leftover? So why can't it itself be just brought now as an oila? It was an osham before, but now it doesn't have its name of an osham anymore. the owner got its kapara already with something else, so why can't it be brought as an oila? Elalav, so the answer is like we said, gzeira la'acha kapara atu lifne kapara. Since before the kapara, it's an osham and it cannot be changed for anything else, even after the kapara of the osham was brought, this animal cannot be brought now as an oila. Shma mina. So we see this concept in these three sources here. Tanya Nami Hachi, going back to the main point that was said before, that according to Rab Shimon, the leftover karbonis of the carbon tamid, which is an oila originally, is later used to be brought as a oilas nadava for the kayetz mizbeach when the mizbeach is empty. We learned this in a braysa. So the braysa says, Ma hein meviin min amisaris. What is brought from the leftover carbon tzibur of the tamid from the year? What's brought from it is kayetz. This is a kayetz kibenois shuach lemizbeach. So the word kayetz actually means a dessert, which is like the dates, or actually kibnei shuach is figs. It's like white figs that are brought for the mizbeach. Rashi here brings the lashon of the pasuk that it says halechem v'hakayetz lechol l'na'odem. Lechem is bread and kayetz is dessert. So this is a dessert for the mizbeach, which means when the mizbeach is empty. But the Gemara asks on this expression, how could you say that this is figs that are brought to the Mizbeach? You're not allowed to bring any soir or devash. Devash is from dates, or the same also regarding figs that are sweet fruits. It's not to be brought in the Mizbeach. What's the expression of this brayse? So Tani Rav Chanina taught kibenois shuach la'adam. Just like a person that eats a dessert, so too the Mizbeach, also you bring these karbonis when it's empty, which is like a dessert for the Mizbeach. Darash Rav Nachman bar Rav Chisda. Rav Nachman bar Rav Chisda darshaned about this. Ein mekitzin ba'oilas ha'oif. You can never take money that are brought as an adove, this money that we have from an adove to bring for the kayetz hamizbeach. You can't use this to buy an oila of an oif, of a bird, to be brought from this money that's left over, that's here, available to buy for the kayetz hamizbeach. It's not a carbon of any individual. It's a carbon of a it's a carbon of a tzibur. So this carbon tzibur that's being brought for kayetz hamizbeach from this domain nedave cannot be brought from a bird. Amar Rave, so Rave says about this, ha burche. This is not true. This is something that you have no source. You just made it up. Amalei Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. So Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says to Rave, my burche. Why are you saying that this is made up? Ana amrisa nalei. I am the one that said it to him. And I said it to him in the name of Rashimi that comes from Nerda. The leftovers that are going to be used for a nidvas tzibur, ozli. So it goes, the leftover monies that goes for an adava for the tzibur that's being brought, karbonis for the kayetz of the mizbeach. And ve'ein oilas oif b'tzibur. The rule is there is no oilas oif that's brought as a carbon tzibur. Rashi brings the pasuk. It says vehikriv minatayrim karbonoi, and it says the karbonoi loshen yachid, referring to an individual. It's not the carbon of the birds are never brought as a carbon tzibur. So therefore, over here as well, when you're bringing it for the kayetz hamizbeach, it's not to be brought from the birds. It's the source for this is very simple. I mean, all the Mefarshim ask on this, that the source is so obvious that it's a pella, that the Rav said on this, that it's a burcha, that there's no source for this, that it's a made-up thing. There's different tirutzim about this, but the source is very simple. Now the Gemara says, going back to the main point, that Shmuel also holds of the point that Rabbi Yochanan said, according to Rab Shimon, that the leftover karbanis tamidim, it's brought as a kayetz hamizbeach. It's then brought as a oilis nadava. The karbanis tzibur that you bring, and then when it's left over from it, sakin moishchasan. The knife pulls it or draws it. Lamashahain, for what they are. Which means, according to Rashi's Pshat, Lamashahain means that for what it was before, which was a carbon tamid, as a oila, if it's left over, it's going to now be brought as a dessert, for the kayetz hamizbeach, also as a carbon oila. So Lamashahain, for whatever it was before, it's brought now as well. That's this expression of the sak and the knife, shechts, and brings it now for the same what it was before. This is Rashi's Pshat in the Gemara, but other Rishonim disagree because according to this pshat, it should have said that the sakin is moishchasan, it shechtzit lamashahoyu, for what it was before. Why does it say lamashahain? So therefore, other Rishonim say, the Adarabah, the Gemara here is going back to what Rabbi Yochanan said, according to the opinion of the Rabbanon, that there's a concept of lev, bezdin, masna, aleim, that it was what it was before is one thing, but then there's a lev, bezdin, masna, aleim, that it could be redeemed, and then it's bought back for the next year, from the monies of the next year. That's what it's talking about over here. Okay. Tanya Nami Yachi. We learned in a Braisa as well, Moide Rab Shimon. Rab Shimon is Moide B'Sa'ir, She'im Le'Karav Beregal. that when you have a goat that was designated for a yontif, for the musif, for the chattas of that yontif, if it wasn't brought on the yontif, yikrav b'rish chaydish. You could bring it on Rish Chaydish. If it wasn't brought on Rish Chaydish, yikrav b'yom kippurim. You could bring it on Yom Kippur for the musaf, for the side of Yom Kippur. If like karav b'yom kippur, yikrav b'regel. You bring it on the next yontif. If like karav b'regel zeh, yikrav b'regel acher. From one yontif, you could bring to a different yontif. Why is this? Since even though the kapara of the Yom Tiv and Yom Kippur and Rosh Chodesh are not exactly the same, but it's all brought as a kapara on the Mizbeach HaChitzen. So therefore, as long as it's a similar kapara from the Mizbeach HaChitzen, you can bring it from one to the other. And the same thing over here, as we're saying, that since it was designated as an oilah, so if it's left over from the carbon oilah for a tamid, you bring it as the oilah for Kahitza Mizbeach. As long as it's a similar thing, it can be brought for something else. This is Rab Shimon's opinion. Going back to the Mishnah, Va'al Zodain, Tumas, Mikdash, V'Kadoshav, Soir Anas B'fnim Chulu. So it said in the Mishnah that besides all the different kaparas that we spoke about till here regarding the carbon on Yom Kippur, there's another thing. If a person b'mezid, was tameh, walking to the Beis HaMikdash or ate from kachim, so the soir that the Kayin Gadol brings inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim, it's mechaper for the mezid as well. So besides what the Gemara said before already, the Mishnah said that the soir that's brought inside is mechaper for a case of Tumas Mikdash for B'Shaygig. And that's a case of a Shaygig where a person has a Yediyah B'Tchila, but he does not have a Yediyah B'Saif. It's also mechaper for a mezid. Says the Gemara, how do we know that it's mechaper for this as well? The Tana Rabbanon, we learned in the Braise, v'chiper ala kodesh mitumas b'nei Yisrael, and the pasuk goes on to say, mi pishayim l'chol chataysam. What does the word pishayim mean? Pishayim elo hamardim. Pishayim means those that rebel, meaning an aveda that's done b'mezid. V'cheinu aimer melech Mayav pashabi. The king of Mayav, pashabi means he rebelled against me. V'aimer, another pasuk it says, oz tifsha livna be'esahi. That Livna, they rebelled in that time. So you see that the term Pesha means an Aveda b'mezid. And then the pasuk goes on to say, Chatois elo ashgogis, v'cheinu oime nefesh kisechta b'shgoga. So because it says in the pasuk regarding this par, or the soy rather, the soy that's brought inside, two terms, Peshayim and Chatoisam, it's mechaper for the case of Tumah b'shaygig, when the person did not have a Yediyah b'saif, he didn't realize, or even regarding a mezid as well. It's mechaper for that as well, because it uses the term Peshayim. Taisus here points out, even though the Gemara before said a few times that it says regarding this carbon that it's only achas pashana, which means it's only mechaper one thing, but that means it's only mechaper on one kapara and not any of the other kaparas that other karbanis chatas of the year are mechaper for. But it could also be mechaper for this mezid. The next thing it said in the Mishnah is that al shar averis shebetayra, regarding all other averis in the Torah, and that's hakalois, va'achamurais, whether lighter averis, more severe averis, hazadainis, va'ashigogis, things that are done b'mezid or b'shaygig. And then the Mishnah goes on to say other details. What does it say there in the Mishnah Vayter? That you have also the cases which are hoida, loy hoida, finu, he didn't know, esse, velois esse, krisis, Mrs. Bezdin, all of these different kinds of averis. What's mechaper for it? The sar of Mishtalech, the sar of the Azazel. So the Gemara asks on this, hainu kalois, hainu esse, velois esse. Why is the Mishnah putting this into seemingly two different categories? It says lighter averis, and then later it says the category of a essa and a lois essa, but it seems to be that is what the lighter averis are, something which is only a essa or a lois essa. Chamura is when it says the more severe averis, hainu krisis and Mrs. Bezdin. That's when there's an aveda with the punishment of krisis and Mrs. Bezdin. So why is the Mishnah dividing it? Further, the question is, hoida, when it says when the person knows he knows what he's doing, hainu mezid, that refers to a mezid. Hoida cannot mean a case of a shaygig where a person found out the aveda that he did, because that you bring a korban chatas for. For that, Yom Kippur, the soira mishtaleach is not mechaper for that. So it means mezid. And when it says loy hoida, hainu shaygig, that refers to shaygig. So then how could it be that... Why does the Mishnah divide it into a separate category? And Rashi here explains, when it says here, loy hoida, which refers to shaygig, we're not talking over here about a case where a person is chayav a korban chatos. Because for whatever a person is chayav a korban chatos for, the soir of the azazel is not mechaper for that. What is it talking about? A case where a person would be chayav a korban osham. And that's in a case where a person ate from the fats. He had in front of him different pieces of meat, and there's fats in it, and he ate from one of them. and it's not clear which one is chaylev and which one is shuman, which one was forbidden fats and which one is not forbidden fats, then you chayav a carbon asham. It's for that kind of a shaygig that the Sarei Mishtalech is mechaper for. Okay, so the Gemara explains that the truth tak is the Mishnah is not saying two different categories here. So Amar, Rav Yehuda explains it goes together. Hachika Amar, this is how you read the Mishnah. Al Shar Averis Shebet Torah, and all Averis of the Torah, Ben Kalas, Ben Chamuris, lighter Averis or more severe Averis, Ben Shasam B'Shegig, Ben Shasam B'Mezid, whether done B'Shegig, which you chayv a Osham for, or B'Mezid, Oysan Shasam B'Shegig, those that are done B'Shegig. So again, as I mentioned, the Shegig we're talking about over here is the kind of Shegig that you chayv an Osham for. Ben Noida Lois Fekon, Ben Loy Noida Lois Fekon, whether the person found out regarding what he did, whether it was Asr or not. And now, ve'elohen kalois, what are the lighter avedos? Esev v'loisesa. So when the Mishnah goes on later to say esev v'loisesa, it's spelling out what is the category of lighter avedos. And ve'elohen chamurais, and what are the more severe avedos? That's krisis and Mrs. Bezdin. That refers to krisis Mrs. Bezdin that will be mechaper for him. Oh, that's how you read the Mishnah. So it's not separate categories. It's just explaining what it said before. Okay, the Hamshchadini will continue. It goes on to the next Lamed. Okay.